Blake Powers, also known as BondLife Chicago. Welcome to Suit Up the Podcast.
Thanks again for having me. Always a pleasure to be here.
Now, for those who are only listening and they're not watching our incredibly gorgeous faces, you are dressed to the nines. You look fantastic.
Thank you.
Aces. And your Bond background in the back is also spectacular. And this is a little tidbit for the listeners and viewers. We are recording Global James Bond Day. So happy Global James Bond Day.
Thank you, Terrence. Happy Global James Bond Day to you as well. Your suit and tie looks awesome as well.
Thank you.
Again, for those that are only listening, I did not even attempt to try to tie my bow tie because that would not have done justice for today's podcast.
But that looks cool. I mean, really, that's the thing is wearing the bow tie untied, I think has like some of the best. There are pictures I did not post today of when I did a birthday thing 2 years ago. And we did full black tie and we were playing poker by the end of it. By then, I perhaps was in a slight degree of inebriation and I had my bow tie untied and I'm trying to mug the camera and oh, do I look drunk? And so those photos did not go up.
I picture like the promotional stills of Pierce Brosnan with the bow tie untied. I probably don't look even half as cool as Pierce does. But if I even look 25%, then it's worth it for me.
Hey, it's 100% worth it. So, Global James Bond Day, did you do anything fun? Anything Bondy specific?
I'll say yes and no to both of those.
Okay.
So I'm on midnight shift. Today I worked day shift and I was in training rather than working on the road. For those that are listening and don't know, I'm a police officer. And today and tomorrow, I'm actually in training for dignitary protection details.
That's so cool.
I requested that training and I didn't even think that my department would send me, but it was one of those ones that was just offered for the region. And I was like, that sounds like Bond. Hell yeah. And I got approved for it. I'm sent to it. And so, yes and no, because I didn't do anything out of the ordinary, except for obviously schedule this with you today. But I went to work and kind of one of the blessings in disguise as being a police officer is you kind of fit a little bit of Bond into your day most of the time anyway. So what about you?
Main thing was this interview. That is what I'm going to put as my, analyze this. Mr. Bond had posted like a question on his thing. What are you doing for Global James Bond Day? And I was like, working out. He's like, I'm not certain that's much of a celebration. I'm like, anytime it's not cardio, it is a celebration.
I agree 100% with that.
And we are running a giveaway for this custom Double OT mug. I'm holding up very Vera from Wheel of Fortune, which I'm realizing is an out-of-date reference for anyone listening. Because if you know what a podcast is, you probably don't know what Wheel of Fortune is. And
I think it's still running.
Probably. So you can sign up and get the chance to win a Double OT mug.
Check it out. He's got it on his Instagram. I already signed up myself.
I saw that. I think that you have earned your Double OT mug regardless at this point, Blake.
Thank you.
So, High Time to Kill. I am so excited to talk about this book. This was one of the first Bond books I read ever. I only think I had finished reading all the Fleming books before I read High Time to Kill. Just what a great reread. You've recently gone through the Raymond Benson books. And first and foremost, I have to ask, what did you think of Raymond Benson's arc writing Bond in general? And then what do you think of High Time to Kill in specific?
So as we've discussed before, I mean, I thought that each of the 6 original books that Raymond Benson wrote were phenomenal in their own right. I think like I would love to see any of them as a movie. And then also what I told you is it's almost like the Raymond Benson book that I'm reading, the current one is my favorite, or the one that I just finished reading is my favorite for the most part. Like they were all good, and whichever one was the most fresh in my mind was the one that I was really loving the most. They were all really good. I already said that a bunch. And I thought that Raymond Benson did a really good job of kind of the same exact writing style and depicting that exact same kind of character as Bond, that Fleming did and had created originally. Um, and yeah, I just thought he knocked it out of the park with all that.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I love about obviously we had the opportunity to interview Raymond Benson, which was absolutely amazing. One of those nerd moments where I'm sitting there going, I can't believe we're talking.
For
But
sure.
I he is a big fan, first and
Yep.
foremost, of Fleming. And what I appreciate is he takes a very Fleming approach to the writing, which is awesome because it's definitely something I think that as we've read, obviously there are multiple different continuation authors.
Yep.
John Gardner's book specifically, I cringe just ever so slightly as I say it. His books have a tendency to feel very much like, oh, it's just Roger Moore on screen.
Right.
Whereas I think Raymond Benson really does a great job being true to Fleming and
Right. The
that legacy.
Fleming written
Mm-hmm.
character rather than trying to write for a specific actor. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which I will say, the funny thing is about High Time to Kill, I think that there are two moments where I see a Bond actor, weirdly
Okay.
enough. In the golf scene, it's
Yeah.
hard not to think of Connery.
I agree completely. Yeah. It's hard, especially because we've seen him obviously play golf and a matter of wager while playing golf. Um, and then on top of that, like it's Connery. So, and I told you before, whenever I read any of the Bond novels, I usually picture Connery anyway. But in a moment where we see him in a different movie, in a different
Mm-hmm.
storyline, play golf and depict that so well, it's hard to not picture
Mm-hmm.
him in that role. Yeah, for sure.
And then, ironically, they're both the games of chance because then when they do the axe throwing thing later,
Yeah.
I see for whatever reason when he kind of just has his blow up, I see Brosnan's face.
Okay.
I
I
don't
could
know
see
why,
that.
but that one like moment, all of a sudden I see Brosnan.
I so I agree. I could see that. And then I actually kind of going back to the golf game,
Mm-hmm.
but just the back and forth in the bar afterwards or the
Oh yeah,
clubhouse.
with Tanner.
That to me is more Brosnan as well, just
Mm-hmm.
because I kind of picture that, it's kind of more of like a Die Another Day type
Mm-hmm.
Brosnan feel where it's like, again, we're going to get into it, but he is going back and forth with somebody that he went to school with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like that childhood rivalry. And I kind of picture Brosnan in more of that role
Having
than I
more of
would
a chip on
see,
his shoulder type
yeah, than I would
situation,
see Connery having that.
which I think that that's fair. Honestly, it's always interesting to see like chart the bonds by comparison to the modern day
Right.
eras. So like I'm sure you're familiar with Sherlock with Benedict
Yes.
Cumberbatch. I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan. I literally have behind me in that corner four different sets of the complete Sherlock Holmes. Big
Awesome.
Sherlock Holmes fan. And one of the things I find interesting in that reboot series with Benedict Cumberbatch is you see same idea of a character, but very different in how they act
Okay.
because of modern day versus Victorian era.
Right.
And I think that there is something to that even with Bond, where, okay, how Bond reacting in the 90s is
Right.
still different than Bond would act in the 40s or, well, the 50s or the
Right.
60s.
50s, 60s. Yeah.
So you definitely would have where potentially he does have a bit more of a chip on his shoulder in that more modern era than you
Right.
do earlier. You could also say he's just whinier, but like we don't need to add that stereotype to modern generations.
Yeah.
So
I also
let
just can't picture, sorry to cut you off. I can't
yeah,
picture Connery losing at anything. So that's,
no. He Connery would have accidentally like he'd accidentally club the guy in the head
yep.
before he'd let him lose.
Yep. Oh, bummer. Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry, have you fallen asleep? Did you slip on something?
It's going to be a 4-stroke penalty.
So let's get into the plot overall. So the dynamic between Bond and Tanner, I think
Hmm.
really one of the best things in the Brosnan era that we had is Michael Kitchen playing Tanner
Yes, I agree.
with Pierce Brosnan as Bond. That dynamic they have is amazing, and I'm glad that we got it on film because you do see that relationship in the books that
Right.
then this one continues really nicely. We have this beautiful golf game between Tanner and Bond.
Right.
But I'm realizing before that we have the stuff in the Bahamas.
Yes, and that's so that was one of my notes too.
Yeah.
It was really kind of one of the first times, at least that I can remember off the top of my head, where we have Bond in a like he's on holiday at the beginning of the
Mm-hmm.
book.
Yeah.
And you know, spoilers, but he's on holiday with his personal secretary, Miss Marksonby or Marksbury. But yeah, he's at what they call Shame Lady, his estate or vacation house in Jamaica, and that part's pretty cool. You're right, before getting into the golf game, yeah.
Well, and what I like is I had forgotten because again, I read the Benson novels out of order
Right.
as a kid. So I forgot that Helena had been set up like from 0 - 10.
Right.
So, but
Yeah,
this is by the third book in Benson's collection.
Right. And so for me, because I read them slightly out of order in
Mm-hmm.
that the because I got the trilogy book. So I got the blue one and then the red one. And I Googled which ones were in order. And so the first two books in the red one were the first two Benson novels.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, I'll start with the red one. So I read those two, and then technically it was actually kind of cool reading through um not so much High Time to Kill, but the last one,
Mm-hmm.
which I just finished, which was Never Dream of Dying,
Mm-hmm.
because the third book in the Red trilogy is actually the last book,
Yes.
and so you start to not to give too much away for that one, because since we're not doing a podcast on that one today, but you start seeing tie-ins to how Benson. So these three kind of build up to each other, or there's three Union books that kind of
Mm-hmm.
lead up to each other, and then the fourth one is that last one in the red one,
It's like an
and
epilogue.
yeah, and so that was really cool how it kind of fills all in together. But then to your point, the first three books before this, or two books before this one, Miss Marksbury is the same secretary throughout, and they don't really have they kind of have like a money penny Bond relationship
Mm-hmm.
until the beginning of this one, where it becomes a little bit more romantic. But she's one of the characters that kind of flows throughout. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed and if I remember correctly, Shame Lady, gonna double check this. James Bond. I'm pretty sure Shame Lady had something to do with Ian Fleming.
Oh, maybe. Is it maybe somewhere near Goldeneye or something like that, or just a different
I
estate that he
I
had?
think it might be Ian Fleming. This is people love hearing people Google on. I don't see it coming up right away, but the point here should be there is a connection with Shame Lady, and
Well, and actually,
yeah,
I
okay.
think maybe because you've got it in front of you, I think in like the Man with the Golden Gun, for a certain point in time, or one of the last Fleming novels, they mention like, why don't you go to Shame Lady for a while to basically to take a holiday or to relax?
Oh, the alternative choice for the name of GoldenEye would have been Shame Lady.
Oh,
That's what it
okay.
is. What a good looking mug there he has.
Check out the podcast and his website for that too. Thank you.
I'll be honest, I was this close to using my BondLife Chicago mug, which has a very prominent spot in my mug collection. So
Yours as well.
definitely people should also check that out. So yes, Shame Lady was the alternative name. That's why it was used.
Gotcha.
I loved that. So Helena Marksbury, English names.
That's
We
how
are
I
going to
spelled it
butcher
there.
it.
Wait till we get to the French ones.
I know. I was looking at that. I'm like, okay, how pretentious do I sound if I try pronouncing it correctly, or is that the incorrect way? It gets even worse. You know what it's like driving around here in the Midwest. We've
Yep.
taken so many. I live in Des Moines. It's actually
Mm-hmm.
pronounced the French way. Well, then a comedian had like pointed out, I visit Des Moines. Okay, so that's the correct pronunciation. Tomorrow I'll be going to Detroit, and because it's a caption, you can see it's Detroit. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, that's right. We do inconsistently use European names
Well,
in
and
the
even
Midwest.
Illinois, some people here call it Illinois with the S and it's not silent. So
Yeah. We're an amazing people. It's incredible James Bond has not come to the Midwest yet. I still am holding out for
maybe
that Chicago
someday.
adventure.
Yes.
One of the things I thought was really cool is Helena Marksberry. I say cool. It was a nice little flourish because it's not really necessary, but it's definitely one of the things as a fan, you're like, oh, this is kind of hitting that Fleming trope
Yep.
where they make the comment that Helena has one breast that like
Is
droops a little bit
yeah, it's a
more,
little lopsided.
a little lopsided. And it's such a like non thing, but because in the Fleming canon of books, for those that don't know, frequently Fleming liked to give his women some characteristic that just was a little flawed in some way. So like in the case of Honey Shell Rider, her nose is broken.
Right. They're all tens out of ten the way that they appear and their personality, but they're not 11 out of tens because they have this one little appearance quirk.
Or in the case of the gal in Moonraker, she already has a boyfriend. So,
Right.
things
Right.
like that.
But that doesn't come out until
Until the end.
yeah.
Bond's just asking himself, where is the flaw in this one?
Right. There's
So
supposed to be something.
there's supposed to be something. They are in the Bahamas, and the governor invites them to his mansion. This is also the same governor that he met in Quantum of Solace and the short story, not the
Yep.
film. And I love how Benson just completely sidesteps the fact that by now the governor is like aged and old. And they make a joke, I think, even about how Bond looks like he hasn't aged a day.
Yes. And it's also kind of funny because now I haven't read that short story in a long time. And obviously, from what I remember, like they enjoy sharing stories with each other. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, Bond was like completely like bored out of his
Bored out of
mind
his
at that
mind.
party. And so the fact that he would then be like, "Oh, I'm here with my personal secretary and we're having an awesome time," but you know what would really just like end it right would be let's go to the governor's house again and have another, bland night.
Now, at that point, had he and Helena started having their arguments yet?
I don't remember. I think so. I think there was like one brief disagreement
Yeah.
because mentioning how they were going to have to change
She starts
things.
talking about her sister, who
Yeah.
has kids and is married, and all I can think is, wow, this is like the perfect like depiction of how does a wonderfully romantic tropical weekend vacation
Yep.
literally take a nosedive.
So where would you say this is going?
The words Bond never wants to hear. He's just like, where's the convenient bullet to take you
Yep.
away?
Yep.
So when they're there, the governor starts talking about how he's received a mysterious message from this terrorist organization called
Yep.
the Union.
The Union.
And I love, again, like something I didn't realize until I started reading through enough of these books is having that like menacing presence, like basically the Russians, but we can't make them the Russians, so we have to come up with something else, is such a wonderful recurring theme in
Right.
Bond that has literally translated across every thriller series into the modern era. If you pick up a Tom Clancy novel, there's like 8 different not Russian secret organizations.
Just very similarly related and structured.
Yes. Oh, and always they have ex-Russian military personnel as their explanation. I'm like, sure, sure, sure.
Right.
The governor says that he's been threatened unless he does XYZ, they're going to kill him. Bond's like, well,
Yep.
I'll be happy to protect you at this swanky party.
Yeah.
And this is yet again that thing where Bond, we question how competent he is because he is not able to defend the governor, and the governor does die.
Right.
Shocker. And there's like this message from the Union, and they catch the guy, don't they?
Um,
And he like does the whole cyanide pill.
I believe so, yeah. And then I think part of it with the message was correct me if I'm wrong, I think that he got cut, his neck got slit ear to ear, which
is
as you
the
get
method.
further, right, that is the method of the Union assassinations.
Which, especially, we're not going to spoil it for this episode because I really do think that people should do the full Union trilogy. Maybe
Definitely.
we'll even do the full Union trilogy. That would be fun. But
I'm
in
game.
In that, there, by the time you get to that final book, the slitting of the neck means so much more because of the origins of the Union.
Right.
You
Yes.
start putting the pieces together and go, ooh. I mean, I don't think it's too much of spoiled because we meet Le Garant in the book. Uh,
Right.
there's a Corsican influence, and the
Yep.
Corsican mafia, their thing was to slit the throat.
Because of the now I'm forgetting the phrase, but it's like not the revenge, but
The
what is it?
vendetta,
Yes, the vendetta. Yes. Yeah.
which is awesome. So that is the first thing that happens in the book. That's the major set piece. We have our minds and our we're ready for the rest of the story. And what comes next? An incredible golf game.
Yep.
Now, the thing to keep in mind, gentle listener and viewer, is that we can't have just any game show up in a Bond book. It has to be something that is tense, that has stakes. And what I love is it would seem cliche to put a golf game in a Bond book at this point because it's Goldfinger. It's like a 5-chapter golf game that seems
Right.
like the most tense thing on earth. If you've ever watched golf in person, you know it is one of the slowest, most boring games possible. And you just desperately hope that you have a very interesting announcer for the game. Hey, PGA, I am always willing to be the announcer for the golf games, just as an FYI. I'm sure they're listening.
Yes.
When they're there, so they play against this is the first the
Roland
fun name.
Roland, and so I know how to pronounce this one because I work with somebody that has it spelled the same way, so I'm going to pronounce it the same. Roland Marquis, who is
Correct.
who is a old school mate of Bond's back in the day.
Mm-hmm. And Stephen Harding, thank goodness for at least one easier name. Although I'm surprised that there wasn't like a pun about him being a Harding.
I thought I had to like triple read that. I was like, Wait a second. Wait a second." It-
Raymond Benson, it was hanging right
yeah.
there, low hanging fruit. So they play this tense game of golf, and it actually has an interesting mirror to the whole Moonraker game
Yeah.
because there's a scene in the Moonraker game where the guy that's playing with Drax is like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm not certain I want to keep upping the stakes here for the bet. And
Right.
Drax is like, oh, I'll take care of it. Bond essentially does the exact same thing with Tanner. Tanner's
Yep.
like, I don't really
It's a
want
little bit
to.
just a little too rich for my blood.
And it's a tense game, but what's fascinating about it is not only so narratively, it's a perfect opportunity to show Roland's rivalry with Bond
Yeah. Yeah.
in a great way. It also shows competency. What I also think it does a great job is subverting the Bond trope because he doesn't cheat.
Right.
And that's something you, as a Bond fan especially, are reading this book and waiting for that moment where Roland cheats and Bond wins.
And
Bond
neither
loses.
happens. Yeah, neither
It's like
happens.
your mind is blown and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, you're just poised, ready for the rest of the story to keep going on.
Right.
What else did
And
you think about from the golf game?
I thought it was really good. I mean, it doesn't sound like you care too much for golf, nor do I, but Benson does a great job of
Mm-hmm.
of bringing it into a tense chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I think he does a really good job just as Fleming did of, cuz Horowitz didn't really have much as
You know,
far as
he
like
didn't.
games.
That's
So
actually something I never thought about before. You're
right,
right.
and Benson throughout several of his books, they
Mm-hmm.
have several different games, and they're super suspenseful, high tension, and you can basically picture what's going on, even though obviously you're just reading a book, and it's about either a card game or this one a golf game. And I thought that he does a really good job of that. And then, like you said, you're waiting for that moment where it's going to be like, okay, how's he going to catch him cheating, or what's going to happen, or oh, he's just going to best him. Like it's, and then next thing you know, they're sitting at the clubhouse and
Bond's
they're
writing him a
going
check.
over, yeah, hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it's like, and from previous, you know, Bond books that Bond doesn't make that kind of money. So it's like, oh, geez.
It actually has consequences to it. And that's something that, again, I think that I enjoy about Benson's books overall. Like we were talking about, it was interesting for reading all of them. You realize he has an arc for Bond, which none of the other continuation authors really did other than Fleming himself, because in part, either if they're one-offs or like in the case of Horowitz, there really isn't much you can do because you're trying to work within the Fleming arc.
And they're all the Horowitz ones, there's an arc in that there's a beginning, middle, and end, but they're not really connected sequential or correlated. Right. And they're not in order. So they're not,
it's an interesting dynamic again, where just the very idea of the continuation author and the trying to come up with new things to do with this character. That's why I think that this golf scene shines so much, is that it's something that could easily be a cliche in a Bond novel, but is energetic and fascinating and a set piece, which, speaking of, as a set piece, this is the same golf course they sets the game at, is the one that actually the filming of Goldfinger happened.
I didn't know that until I listened to the Benson interview and he had shared that with you. Yeah, I thought that was really cool too. I mean, obviously he knew about it, so of course I'm going to put it there. Like, that's a no-brainer. I thought that was pretty neat.
It's things like that that make me really enjoy the Benson novels, is because, again, it isn't there are some authors where it's like they just throw in Bond references, like a canon at you.
Right.
Going, it's kind of like modern Star Wars, similar complaints, where it's like member berries. Don't you remember this? Don't you remember that? Don't you remember that? Whereas I think Benson has a wonderfully subtle touch. With when he drops, hey, remember this.
Well, and it all has meaning. It's thought out and it has meaning. And then, because I've actually met Raymond Benson at one of the movies that we've done, not we've, but that I've gone to, that
someday I'll go to one with you.
Hopefully soon. But he's super down to earth. Obviously, you saw that, and he is totally 100% a Bond fan. He gets us. He thinks like us, and he's just an amazing writer. So he also got to write several books himself, and it's so like those types of well thought out ideas. It's like, of course, if I was going to write a story about a golf game in the UK, whether it was Bond or not, I would probably pick that same golf course. And it's like, I have to.
It's required at that point.
Right.
Otherwise, you lose your Bond fan club membership card.
Yep, it gets revoked right away.
The license revoked. After the game, so this also introduces us to Roland.
Yes.
And I sometimes wonder how Roland Hume feels when he reads this book. Just every now and again, it makes me chuckle.
What a dastardly person.
What a dastardly person. It's a pity we didn't have like the Brosnan Bond version of this, because then we could have just like clipped out that GIF and got Roland, you piece of crap, or something like that, just to have anyway. So there's a top secret formula. Roland is a part of this, and we learn about this through the golf game. He's a part of this super secret thing that's going on. He's like, Bond, I'm sure your security clearance doesn't give you permission to know this.
Yep, he almost can't help himself but to try to throw it in Bond's face.
Yeah, and it's for a thing called Skin 17, which, and yes, I am reading off the Wikipedia page to make sure I get this right, because it's one of those things where at the end of the day, this is just a MacGuffin. It is a, actually, they don't even define it here in the Wikipedia page.
If I remember, it's like part of the material, or like something that would go on top of on top of an aircraft, not a spacecraft. I almost thought spacecraft for a second, to like make sure that
that's what you're thinking.
Yeah, to make sure that it doesn't like disintegrate or heat up too much,
while still maintaining
go faster and
go fast while like being cloaked, something like that.
Right.
This is, I think, honestly, maybe one of the most Mission Impossible-esque.
It seems a little bit out there. That's for
which
sure.
which I am totally on board with. I think the thing
Yeah.
that makes this amazing is much like Fleming, it's not that it's impossible, it's that it's improbable.
Right.
And that's where I think that line really, and that's again part of what I like about this book is it
Yep.
straddles that line ever so perfectly.
And then, like you said, I mean, they go into a good chapter and a half, kind of focusing on it and
Mm,
explaining it. But then, and the
doesn't
rest of the
matter at
book is
all.
about it, kind of, but it's not really. It's not really what comes into play for the mission.
So there was a novella that Raymond Benson wrote that I read in preparation of the interview. We didn't get to talk
Okay.
about, but it was called MacGuffin. A MacGuffin
Okay.
is the object. So like the in this case, the Skin 17 microdot in
Yep.
the Infinity War saga, the Infinity Stones,
Yep.
and it doesn't matter at all
Okay.
other than to propel the plot.
Right. It's just
In
what needs to
it,
keep going.
yeah. Well, what I loved about his little short story thing is that it literally is like a travel case.
Okay.
And it moves from person to person to person that wants the travel case. We never know what's in it until the end when it says blank opened it and the world ended.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm like, that what a great way because it perfectly illustrates the idea of the MacGuffin, which is that it
Yeah.
really doesn't matter so long as it moves the plot along.
Right. As long as the story gets by. Yeah.
Which again, this is such a great spycraft thing because so Roland and Harding both steal the microdot, killing the scientist in a very brutal fashion. Even down
Yeah.
to we see like so Harding is a part of the Union, but Roland isn't. Roland was paid, and honestly, when you find out how much he was paid, I'm like, wow, dude, you got paid like $6,000
Yeah. Not very much. You
to betray
probably
your
could have held
country.
out. You could have probably held out for quite a bit more there, pal.
Especially when you find out how much they're like trying to sell this technology
Yep.
off for later on. And so they put it in, they take it to, they smuggle it out of the UK into Belgium.
Yes.
And there it's put into a pace that the actual microdot is put into a pacemaker
Yep.
for a Chinese national that then they're trying to get him out. Of course, funny thing, dead body of a scientist on the floor, bleeding out with a sign that says, it's practically like having the dagger stuck in the paper.
Yeah.
It says, the Union did this. Because
Yeah.
the Union literally says, we did this.
Yep.
I don't know what they expected, but yeah, all hands go on deck. And of course, Bond is called in to help.
And so to your point too, with the Union taking credit for it, going back when he's still at Shame, or not at Shame Lady, but at the governor's party, like they're sharing notes about the Union, and it's like, yeah, we kind of heard of them, but we really don't have much about them. But the Union can't help themselves but take credit for all of these things, and it's like, hey, we're right here. Come get
They're
us.
like a
Try and
Batman
find
villain.
us. Yeah.
They can't help
So
themselves.
yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting because it's very much like we have no idea really who they are or if they even truly exist, but they're going to continue to just kill people their one way and leave notes claiming that they did it to help leave breadcrumbs.
Yes, we need to keep this plot moving forward. And what I like is, so again, we'll get that as we arc this. The plot does a good job of not making it a personal thing for Bond,
Right.
although it does add personal stakes as the story goes along. And I think that in this book, especially, they do a great job of setting up how those stakes work out.
Yes.
When Bond gets to Belgium, he meets Gina Hollander, who is from Station B. And I can't say as I remember her far too much, other than she's there for Bond to sleep with.
Yeah.
And she's described as having pixie cut. And the moment I heard that, all I kept thinking of was Jeopardy Lane and having like to put the book down and go, this isn't Trigger Mortis. This isn't Trigger Mortis. This isn't Trigger Mortis.
So I think I might still have it in my phone, and I didn't remember it until just now because I know we talked about it with Trigger Mortis and how funny she was described. Because there is a part here when he's initially meeting her that he describes her to have like a young teenage boy's body. And I know I at one point I don't I know I didn't send it to you. I only just remembered now. I took a picture of that page and was going to send it to you and be like, 2 times in a row. Like, what in the world is going on? He could
Well,
have almost any woman in the world, and he's picking these women here. Like, what is going on?
there's no accounting for taste. I just it anyway. So that happened, and of
Yep.
course they bang, and the book moves past it nearly as quickly as we do. And then we find out because they chase down where Lee is, and there's this huge sequence. There's actually a really big car chase that
Yep.
happens with a drone. And this is where I fade out in the book because I don't really find car chases all that fascinating. But what I do like is that with the drone, it's not an offensive use of technology, where in the 90s, I think it's far too easy to go way too much in, oh, look at this techno gadget that we have.
Right.
Really, a drone, yeah, that's cool in the 90s. It's still cool now.
I thought it was a tasteful use of some cool Bond gadgets or from
Mm-hmm.
Q gadgets that were built into his car. I thought that
Mm-hmm.
they were, like you said, it wasn't overly outrageous, but it
It drives a
explains,
Jaguar too, which I like.
yeah, and it explains how he's able to defeat like the 3 or 4 cars that is chasing him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Were there any other notes that you had from the whole Belgium Flemish?
Not really. Like you said, it goes by
It really
rather
moves
quickly.
quickly. It's
Um,
literally like wham bam, thank you, ma'am.
yep. I think the only thing is that I can't even remember, but he tracks down that, oh, no, because that's not until
He
the
finds the
next country.
doctor who did the thing for Lee,
Right,
and that's
because he
how he
wrote
finds that
down
piece.
right, because he wrote down on a piece of paper that had like the doctor's office's name, but he
Mm-hmm.
was like a prescription pad and basically drew like a person's body and like an X on the guy's heart or something like that. So that's how he goes and he asks that, and then it leads to pacemaker, but he still doesn't even really understand what's inside the pacemaker that he's trying to find. Yeah.
He's literally grasping at straws because, again, like, to be fair, that is how this book does a great job operating on Bond logic, which
Yes.
is crash through as much as you have to
Yep.
until you find out what happens. It's either the subtle spy approach or the James Bond approach, which is the least subtle on Earth.
His version of being a detective, to steal a pun, is he is a blunt instrument. He's not snooping
Mm-hmm.
very often. He's knocking through doors and then fighting his way back out because he made too much noise, even though he wasn't trying to make too much noise.
So there's this whole sequence where Lee is basically sold out by Harding,
Mm-hmm.
where where Lee thinks he's going to get taken to this like private airplane to go to the I can't remember where they sold him off to, but it wasn't China. Was it Russia? It
Uh,
doesn't matter. And it
there's so
doesn't matter
many
for the
different,
story
yeah, there's
either.
so many
They're
different
competing
parts in there.
interests.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's going one place. These other guys who Harding sold him out to are going to take him somewhere else. They find this out mid-flight. And on
Yep.
this flight, which contains like American diplomats,
Yeah, it's like a
Russian
tourist.
diplomats.
It was a tourist flight
Yeah.
of some sort, and that was one. So one thing building off of that, because Bond, at this point in the story, initially Bond has caught up to them.
Mm-hmm.
He's sent whatever local station there to stop the plane that he believes they're going to, only to find out that these other 2 guys that actually took Lee
Took him on a
are
different
not
plane.
with that plan. They put him on a different plane that basically flies, like takes off on the runway as this other team hits the plane that Bond thinks it is, which
Mm-hmm.
then again propels the story to the next segment.
Which honestly, I really like that bit because so I've been reading a lot of Elmore Leonard recently. And one of the
Okay.
things Elmore Leonard does a great job at doing is that idea of set up to have this big thing happen. You expect this big thing is going to happen. And he subverts it by having something come at it sideways.
Yep.
And then you think, oh, it's resolved. And then something else falls over, basically.
Right. Right.
Which this section in the book does a great job of being that kind of heist-ish,
Right.
where Bond is doing all the right things, but still makes a mistake because some new person has gotten
Yep.
involved in it and didn't know.
Yeah, it's a easy, not
Mhm.
easy, but it's a a smooth transition into another segment of the storyline rather than making it feel kind of forced or like,
Mhm.
okay, like sure that happened. It's very realistic. Like, yeah, no, he's actually being sold to somebody other than who he thinks it is. Therefore, he's got a different exit route.
And what makes it work, here's talking smooth transitions. Dear goodness, the plane goes down, lands on a mountain. And so the whole plot of this book, in case you haven't seen the cover, where it's like the original cover, like has the guy with his grappling hook thing.
Yep, yep,
Pitch Bond has to mountain climb to get a MacGuffin. Trying to like the setup. That's like the first third of the book is just set up to get to like the main meat and potatoes of what
yep.
this book is. And it does a brilliant job of doing it because you never feel like you're being cheated by, okay, I'm waiting for the story to kick in.
Right, right. It definitely flows. And then the other thing I liked, and I did have this as a note too, like there's mentions of it, I think, in the Fleming books, and then obviously we get it in Spectre, but
Mm-hmm.
Bond is like a novice or amateur mountain climber himself. Now we don't
Yeah.
really see it too often, but it's something he enjoys. So I really liked that aspect being brought into a Bond novel as well. That it's, you know, oh, it's same with like
Mm-hmm.
the ones where he has to go to the Caribbean, where he's an amazing swimmer, he's a great scuba diver. Of course, he's going to kick butt and save the day in Thunderball because he can do all these things. It's kind of the same thing where it's like he's not the world's best mountain climber, but he knows how to mountain climb.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he's going to be able to excel and complete the mission type deal.
Well, and what I love about that, it's sad that we haven't gotten to see that as like a centerpiece in any of the films
Right.
because it is such a old world hobby.
Yep.
And I think that they use that to great effect in this book, where I mean, look at the people that are like these mountaineers. This
Yeah.
is very much a unique hobby that doesn't attract a lot of people, nor should
Right.
it for that matter. And but it's a very specific type of thing.
Yes.
And you have to again have training for it. So it works well because it is something of Bond's canon that even Fleming didn't explore very much.
Right.
That has this classic feel to it that feels so so adventurous.
Adventurous, and it would be obviously in the book it's touched on, but it would be a very original thing in a movie. There really aren't any other movies
Mm-hmm.
or action movies per se
The
that are
only
kind of
one
focused on it.
is there's only one that I can think of. It's what's it called? It's one with Die Hard on a Mountain.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've ever seen that one. It sounds familiar, but
John
I don't.
Lithgow plays
Okay.
the villain. Eh, what I love is I'm gonna type Die Hard on a Mountain and I'm gonna get the answer. Cliffhanger
Oh, okay.
stars
Then that I
Sylvester
did see.
Stallone.
That I did see. Yeah, a long time ago, but I have seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, so like that's the only one I can think of that's like a film that uses mountain climbing like as the centerpiece.
Right. And that would be awesome for another story for that, but we'll see what we get.
Hey, it's still Global James Bond Day. Maybe we'll get another announcement. I doubt it, but it'd be nice.
Yeah.
Um, see us throwing shade. I'm never gonna get asked on an Eon tour. The so they find out that the plane went down because technology, they know plane goes down. They found out that Lee was on it.
Yep.
And now it becomes a race to get to the top of that mountain. Technically, they can't actually get to the peak because this is a sacred mountain in Nepal.
Yep.
And it will offend the gods or spirits. I'm always unclear on how they explain it in the book.
Either,
We
either
don't need to
or.
know it.
Yep.
And so they can't cross a certain threshold, but thankfully the plane is below that. Well, wouldn't you know, who is an expert mountaineer who also happens to have the appropriate security clearance to lead a mission like this? Could it be Roland?
Yep. Roland Marquis returns his ugly head back into the MI6 building.
I can just imagine, like, I would have loved to see Toby Stevens play this role.
Okay, I could see that.
Because again, he just has that swarmy Britishness that where you're like, I just want to punch you in the face.
Yep. You already just look like a guy I don't like.
Yes, which I'm sure he's a wonderful man. I love him in Black Sails. He is
Yes.
absolutely amazing in that show. And he's narrated two of the Bond audiobooks
Oh,
from
cool.
Russia with Love and Carte Blanche.
Okay.
So he's a fantastic performer. He's also done a bunch of Bond radio dramas. Anyway,
Cool.
that to redeem the fact that I said he looks like someone you want to punch. And but I see him like walking into that room to talk with M. And you could just, because when he enters the room and talks to M and M's asking him to help lead this mission, you just see him like kind of pivot between that I'm kissing your butt and aren't I amazing?
Yes, and it's a lot of yeah, kissing M's butt a little bit while shoving all of it into Bond's face,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time, throughout the book, he's got to remind Bond who the team leader is. And I actually getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I think that through most of the story, Bond does a really good job of, I guess, keeping his cool more or less,
Mm-hmm.
and just being like, whatever, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you go over there and do whatever. You can be the team leader. I'm here for one specific thing, and like, like, I'm too busy for you right now.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like that notion of you know how when you're around someone that's way more political than you are and
Mm-hmm.
they just start to go on their thing and you're just like, listen, buddy, it's I don't care. It's not my
Yeah,
problem.
barking up the wrong tree today,
Barking up the
pal.
wrong tree today, pal. That is essentially what Bond does and does so well is just like, listen, I'm on the
Yeah.
mission. He
Yep.
isn't making it personal, which I think is again a great trait from the Fleming books that carries on
Right.
well into these. So, with the excuse of for diplomatic reasons going up there to rescue the bodies, Bond is also going to go up and retrieve the MacGuffin.
Yes.
Skins 17 because skins 1 through 16 didn't work.
Nope.
And he gets a little buddy to take along with him who
Yes.
his name
Ch-
was
Chandra,
Chandra.
if I'm saying Chandra, yeah, he's a gherkin or a Gurkha,
He's a
however.
Gurkha officer, which I thought was so cool. I can't remember like half the details they talk about in the book, but Benson does a great job of giving us like the full rundown on the history of how there is like this whole regiment of Gurkha soldiers.
Yes. And I thought as far as like the Bond allies go, Benson
Mm-hmm.
does a really good job of creating a very close knit relationship between the two of them that again kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but personally I didn't really care for the way
Mm-hmm.
that he was killed off.
Yeah.
I felt like I almost had enough of a care and enough like
Yeah.
rapport with him that I wish it would have been a little bit better.
Yes.
That's my one nitpick, I guess. Probably of the whole book would just be that, really.
I agree. And I think that that's interesting is that's almost another trope of like a lot of the Bond books.
Right.
I mean, how does Quarrel die?
That's true too. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess they all kind of. You know that they're gonna die, which that part I'm
Yeah.
fine with. I just was hoping that it would be slightly more heroic, but I don't know.
It's an interesting balance because I do agree. I think that he was a good enough character that I wanted him. I hoped he was going to survive. Like I really
Yeah.
did. They do a great job of there's a fine, like delicate balance of it's kind of like in a horror movie where you need to fatten up the the personality of the characters enough where
Right.
you care a little bit if they
Right.
die, but not too much where like you're crying if they
Right.
die. You
Right.
are in a horror movie. You're aware the only purpose of these teenagers wanting to have premarital sex is so that they die.
Yes. A most gruesome and silly death.
The most gruesome and silly death. Hey, Halloween's just around the corner. It's
Yep.
that time of year. I'm a little disappointed we've never had a like Bond themed Halloween story. Although I'm trying to remember that Masquerade, Midsummer Night's Masquerade. Is
Um,
it that set on a Halloween party?
I'm I don't think so. I think that it's just a masquerade party at the mansion.
I'm so disappointed because that would have been so cool. But anyway, hey, it's fine. He's all Raymond Benson has already said officially that Midsummer Night is not canon.
Yeah, he said that it was basically sanctioned specifically by Playboy, right?
Yeah, it only exists within the Playboy Bond canon, which is a very limited text. So
And his trilogy book.
and
We've
his
got it.
trilogy book. Well, yes. Oh, thank goodness we have these books. I want to see the Bond Ian Fleming publications republish that one
That would
just
be
for
pretty
kicks and
cool.
giggles.
Yeah.
That would be hilarious. Love to see what the cover came up with for it. So they have to ascend the mountain, which is pronounced Kang Chenjunga.
Sounds perfect to me.
Kang Chenjunga.
I couldn't have said it better than myself.
I think they do shorten it in the book to like it's just Kang at a certain point,
Yeah, something like that.
just to
And
make it easier.
I think it's from what I remember in the book too, they mentioned that it's like the third tallest mountain in the world, which
Yeah.
is again, it's just another amazing feat that we see Bond complete by the end of the book. Yeah.
And so he's got not Gurkha, Chandra there as his ally. He's the only
Yep.
other one besides Roland and Bond that know what he's there for.
Right.
And then we slowly flesh out the rest of the team of meat suits who will eventually be lambs for the slaughter, with the exception of, and this is what I thought was really
Of the
funny,
good
the
doctor.
good doctor who is described in the Wikipedia article as sexy mountaineer Hope Kendall.
And so I wrote this note down too, because like you mentioned before, most Bond girls in the novels all have a tiny little something about them that's wrong. I'm pretty sure she's like described almost as like just perfect. And
Yes.
then on top of it, she's a sex addict.
Yes. Oh my goodness, I forgot about that fact.
And it's like, so we're not only going to get a Bond girl that's attractive because they're all attractive, but no, she's a sex addict as well, and she's the only woman on the entire trek.
So one of the things that I love about the Benson books, in a way that I don't know if we're ever going to get in a future continuation author, is Benson was unapologetic and how non-PC Bond was.
Yeah.
And he put in delightful male fantasy like this.
Yep. Yeah, he did a very good job with that. And then actually I just remembered. So if at all, the only issue with her would be that she is Roland's on again, off again girlfriend.
Which, okay, so one of my favorite and least favorite parts of this book is as they're preparing to go up the mountain because they have to like acclimate, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And you see Bond like watching her and Roland talk, and he gets like a little jealous. And what's difficult is I sit there going, no, actually that tracks. I 100% see Fleming doing the exact same thing for
Yep.
writing Bond's character.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Yeah. That's the only bit of like being personal that there is he's just like, oh God, I hate him now because I wish she was sitting over here by me eating dinner.
Bond, for as cold and calloused as he is, I think especially the book Bond is a deeply romantic character.
Yes.
Not necessarily externally by any stretch, but internally, a very romantic character.
He's definitely in the novels, and I think again,
Old Craig films,
Benson, yeah,
too.
the Craig ones as well, but the Benson novels, he does a really good job of. There's like two or three of them where he's either fallen in love or on the verge of being in love with the Bond girl, and you know, just obviously just doesn't work out one way or another, but he's definitely looking for it a little bit more than just sleeping with somebody just to sleep with them.
Not just to have a good time, unless
Right.
they've got pixie hair and they have the body of a little boy. Oh. So they're gonna go up the mountain. And we should also point out that he's been in communication with MI6, and they think there might be a mole. So they're
Yes.
because there was someone reporting that Bond was in Belgium. And so there's only a few people that would have known, among them Helena, and who has gone missing.
Yes. And all of a sudden, Helena is also not at her apartment, not answering her phone, and not showing up to work. So they don't know where she's at.
That's
And
not a
that
good sign in
actually,
any job. And when you work in the Secret Service, it's like a really bad sign.
yeah, that's for sure. And then I guess that even kind of going back to what we just said last, like Bond's a little bit like
Mm-hmm.
they left on not good terms and kind of like they were breaking up anyways or breaking off the
The relationship.
their relationship. And then he gets this news and he's like, "Oh my god, what's happened to her? Is she okay?"
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of on his mind throughout the rest of it as well.
They ascend up the mountain in various stages because, again, they have to acclimate slowly but surely. And there's a real thing with altitude. Say that 5 times fast. Altitude sickness,
Yeah.
which what I like is that they do show the effects, again, set up, payoff. They show earlier in the book minimal symptoms and then
Yep.
tell you, oh, it could be so much worse if we aren't careful. And you see
Yep.
some people go back down to like the earlier camp so to recover and then try going back up again.
Yeah, and I thought that was another thing Benson did really good at. It makes a lot of sense, but I never really gave mountain climbing much thought. So I never really thought about something like that being a thing. Um,
Illinois isn't known for its mountains.
no, it's definitely not. But I was like, okay, that kind of makes a lot of sense. And then so the way he spells out like the whole entire
Mm-hmm.
game plan and the setting or to go up and like the schedule for it, and then as to why with that altitude sickness, I thought he does a really good job of explaining that to somebody who
Mm-hmm.
is completely naive to it.
Well, and I think that that's what makes, especially in a Bond book where you're trying to include this whole idea, you're trying to include a huge thing that people spend their lives devoted to,
Right.
trying to explain it in 3 or 4 paragraphs.
Right. Because
And
you don't want
he,
to get too much. Yeah.
yeah, it's just enough to know what's going to go on and what's going to happen. And it really does do a great job of feeling like one of those true adventure novels.
Hmm.
Not adventure novels, but true adventure stories where you read about these people that went and scaled this mountain or something like that. Where,
And not to forget, they're gonna scale this mountain in record time
yes, because
because
they
they don't
have
have
to do it
they're at a
before a
race. Yeah.
monsoon.
Yeah.
On top of that, they're not the only ones going up the mountain.
Yeah. So that and it's again, it just adds to it even more. And then the additional suspense of it of we're gonna risk it for all this stuff, and it's the third tallest mountain in the entire world. Oh, and by the way, we're gonna do it faster than anybody else has ever done it. No
It
big deal.
has a great it really does have a heist film feel to it where
Yeah.
they're explaining the plan, you build the team, and then they go and do it. And then it starts to become a horror story
Yeah.
as slowly members of the team are found dead.
Yep.
Gee, wonder what could happen. Before we get to that, though, we should point out that in a oh, when things are still fine scene, we have Roland shooting bottles and
Yeah, like
cans.
cans or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so there I think there's been one or two people found dead at that point,
Hmm.
but
Okay.
they're like halfway up the mountain at this point, and it's at
So
one of
there's
the
no going
spots.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they have to wait. I think it's one of the ones they have to wait like the longer period of
Hmm.
time. And yeah, he's starting to get a little bit wonky himself with the altitude
Hmm.
sickness, so he starts acting irrational, and he's shooting the cans, which leads into like we discussed before, and you brought up the axe throwing competition because Bond's trying to get him to stop, and he gets coaxed into a another competition.
Which I think that's such a great scene too, because again, it's that tight. We have a competition, which always works well in the Bond stuff, but
Yep.
it's something different and it only would happen there.
Right.
It makes the most of the environment for the story. Like they could have played cards, but you can play cards anywhere.
Right.
Where else are you going to use an like ice axe?
Right. And throwing and because you can't even shoot because you're going to start an avalanche if you start shooting.
Mm-hmm. Which again just ups the stakes as we're getting higher and higher up the mountain.
Yep.
and I can't remember if it's by now or it's after this. Uh, they Bond and Chandra, they go after the team of Russians or Chinese. I can't remember which they are.
I think that is so that's I think right where it's right before that because that's when they start getting
Okay.
shot at when they start
Chinese
walking
base
back.
camp.
Yeah,
Yep.
they and I thought that was an interesting concept too because instead of like because I think Bond was ready if I remember correctly to like go and like attack these people
Mm-hmm.
and Chandra being the more experienced mountaineer
Mm-hmm.
is like, no, we can do this peacefully. We just have to destroy all their food, and then they have to go back down there. And then, funny enough, they to destroy their food, Chandra just starts peeing on all of it, and Bond's like, "Oh, that does look like a good idea." And then that's how they destroy the Chinese chance at ascending this mountain.
It wouldn't be the first time that Bond's penis has saved the British Empire.
Yes, that's for sure. He's just creeping the British end up.
So they do that. And something that we failed to mention earlier is that Stephen Harding, after he sold out Mr. Lee, was captured by the Union.
Yes. Or
And
right
that's
or brought back in. I don't know if he was
wasn't
I
he
don't
trying to
remember if he
escape at that point?
I don't remember now if he was trying to escape or if he like went back in to report the failure.
It in any case, failure is not tolerated in any um excuse me, sneeze. Failure is not, I promise listeners I didn't snort coke. Failure is not tolerated in any terrorist organization, as you can imagine. So even when Harding thinks he might have gotten away, Le Grand, who
Yep.
is smoking a cigar, is
And
like,
to build oh, go ahead, finish.
no, go ahead.
So I really liked this whole scene
Mm-hmm.
because it is basically Benson's written it. It's obviously a decade or 15 years ahead, but this
Mm-hmm.
is basically the Spectre scene where we meet Blofeld
Mm-hmm.
in the movie Spectre. The way that it's described with the shadows, you never see his face. The people sat around the desk, all of it
Mm-hmm.
was I mean, obviously I saw the movie before reading the book, but it was just like a perfect setting for that. They did a really good job of then using that in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the thing I think that for the flaws that Spectre has, I'm not going to say it doesn't have any. It does a great job of giving you that scale and
Yeah.
horror of whereas in the 60s Bond films with Blofeld, we get these very Austin Powers now looking
Yep.
sets and scenes, which again are the Ken Adams stuff is great,
Right.
but it doesn't look terrifying,
No, that's why you can make such a great parody of it.
which is why you can make such a great parody of it. I rewatched after doing Die Another Day, Drink Along for my birthday. We
Yep.
went straight from that to watching The Spy Who Shagged Me. And no, what was the second one? The second one.
Oh, Spy Who Shagged Me. Oh no, I think that is this. I think because it's International Man of
You're
Mystery,
right. Okay.
Spy Who
So
Loved Me, and then Gold Member.
we watched The Spy Who Shagged Me, and was pretty blitzed by then, so I'll be honest, I don't remember much about the movie, but I remember going, they do such a great job. Like going from Die Another Day to The Spy Who Shagged Me, it's almost a seamless transition.
It's not really you can't really tell too much that it's a parody with some parts of it.
So Legrand does not tolerate the failure of Harding. More importantly, he sold them out and he values loyalty
Yep.
above anything else. And so someone else steps up behind him and
Yep.
his throat is slit from ear to ear in the vendetta.
Yes. Yeah, and I thought that was kind of interesting that that's where we find out that the two men that took Lee onto the
Mm-hmm.
plane was
Weren't
not part of the
Union.
plan.
Yeah.
Right. That's where we find out that Lee, Harding on his own at this point he was like, screw this, you guys are paying me this much money. I'm gonna make that much money instead. And then obviously his plan gets faltered.
Mm-hmm. And we also find out that the Union has other agents that are starting to circle and try to get the stuff back.
And I
And
think they say go ahead.
I was gonna say they also make the comment there is a mole from like MI6, I think.
That, and I thought they even say specifically that there's a mole in
Oh
the
yes, in the
Trek.
team. Yes,
Yes.
they do. Which then again, it's a very much an Agatha Christie and then there were none type situation
Yeah.
where as they're going up the mountain, there are more and more people dropping off. And the
Yep.
question of who can trust who.
Who's doing this? Yeah.
And I think that's about now that I'll be honest, I don't remember how Kendall and Bond, I just have this get together. I just remember very strongly the scene where he's like about to go to bed and like he like opens her tent flap is open. He goes, "Oh, she's topless."
Yeah.
And
And
he
she's
just
like
stands there.
yeah, and she's sitting there topless, like knowingly
Doesn't
letting him just have a good look.
what else does one do on a frozen ice mountain? Like perfectly logical.
Yep. It's just bare skin. That's
Yeah,
seems like
exactly
the
what
thing to
you
do.
want when you're on in the tundra.
Yep.
Anyway, so they do get together. I think that he like saves her or something like that. Do you remember how that worked?
I think that that's when she comes down with like a really bad case of
Yes.
the altitude sickness, and
Yes.
they don't have time to take her down to the next base camp. So
Mm-hmm.
he uses the Q branch gadget
Mm-hmm.
of like it the way that it's described in the book. I was picturing something very much like the thing from the Kingsman that they wrap around the bullet in the head
Yes.
thing, but it allows them to depressurize their head and get oxygen at the same time, which allows them to come down from the altitude sickness.
Yeah. And so as the course of nature occurs, Bond's sheer animal magnetism has drawn her to him, and she admits to him that yes, she's a sex addict and she has
Yep.
had therapy for it, but you know, it's also so much fun. And he's like, you know, you couldn't be more right. And by then, Marquis has already kept going up.
Yeah, he was part of like the first group to go to the next
Mm-hmm.
spot, and Bond was part of the group to stay back. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they ascend back up, and this is where I have to turn to my notes. Climaxes always Bond. Climaxes always get very messy and hard to remember what happens. After a high evaluation fight. Yeah, I don't worry. I will cut this out for you listeners, but not going to cut it out for you viewers because you guys are here on YouTube to watch me stare off into the distance of the screen. So essentially they have the fight. They find out what's going on, that the guy who was their communications officer was actually the guy with the Union, who was the
Yep.
last person they expected because he was the only one that was supposed to be cleared.
Right. Yeah, the one guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but the one guy who was like a
Paul
last second.
Bach.
Yeah. The one guy was the last second addition to the team because somebody else had fallen out, probably
Mm-hmm.
because the Union had taken them out. And that guy had not been cleared by MI6.
But Marquis said, sure,
He was
he's
good.
fine. I've done stuff with him before.
Right.
And
And so,
Marquis' picture of judgment.
oh, for sure. And of course, with the rivalry, Bond doesn't trust his judgment at all. And so, for the majority of the time going up the mountain, the the breadcrumbs are leading towards this other guy and
Mm-hmm.
not the communication specialist.
Mm-hmm. And so he fight Chandra dies.
So what was it? So Bond gets attacked by
Mm-hmm.
the guy who he thinks is the troublemaker,
Yep. Who
and he
also,
gets
by the way, is doing his own thing.
right. I think with the Russians,
Yes, he's hired by the Russians, you know, the classic enemy,
he's about to cut Bond's throat,
to make it
and
look like the Union did it.
right, he gets shot in the head by Chandra from outside of
Mm-hmm.
the tent because he sees like a shadow.
Mm-hmm.
But then he also sees that prior to that, somebody else had gotten because we did skip over this. They did get to the plane
Mm-hmm.
And Bond brings that body into the tent and he cuts out the pacemaker because nobody else
Mm-hmm.
knows where the pace or where the Skin 17 is.
Yeah.
And they see that um now I'm trying to think too. Does Marquis kill him?
I
And because that's how
Yes,
he grabs,
he
yeah, so
does.
Marquis kills
Russian guy.
the Russian guy, takes off in the snow with
Mm-hmm.
the pacemaker to who knows
Mm-hmm.
where.
And he
Chandra comes,
starts getting delusional. And he starts going, I can ascend the mountain. I can do
right.
this. I am God.
And he throughout the entire time he's already saying he doesn't care what the spirits say or what the agreement is.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting to the top.
Mm-hmm.
And then Chandra comes to Bond's tent and finds this, and he follows the footprints in the snow to try to stop whoever did this. And that's when, while chasing him, he 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 dies
Mm-hmm.
fighting Marquis for
Yeah.
the pacemaker.
Which honestly, if I remember right, they do a good job of basically making it one of those scenarios where if it was a straight fight, yeah, Chandra would have taken him. But because Roland does dirty, he
Right.
gets the
That's
upper
how he
hand.
wins. Yeah.
Because otherwise, yeah, no, the Gurkha definitely takes on a
Yeah.
British fop.
And then from there, I think is when Roland meets with the Russian guy who he's planning on selling it to, who's
Mm-hmm.
on the other side of the mountain.
Because the Russians also have been making their way up there. We haven't had any interaction with them really up until
Right.
now.
He makes them basically show me yours, I'll show you mine. The guy shows him the diamonds and he kills the rest of the Russian team now, and he's going to try to now take that money and sell it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think then it flashes back, I think, to Bond waking up, right?
Mm-hmm. Bond wakes up. Hope has rejoined the group by
Yeah.
then. Doesn't she
And
find him?
yeah, maybe she wakes him up and finds him thinking because yeah, she
Yeah.
slept in the one tent thinking
Mm-hmm.
everybody was dead because
Mm-hmm.
everybody now in the team's throat has been slit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then Roland magically kind of
He says, "Oh, I've
reappears.
returned. Everything's fine." You know, I think he doesn't even blame Chandra or try to.
Yeah, he tries to say something about, oh, I had to chase after him or something. Yeah.
And Bond's like, "Yeah, no, not believing you. Like if I didn't already not believe you before, I definitely don't now."
Yeah.
And from there, uh, they return to the. This is when he runs up to get to the top of the mountain. Is he says, I'm
Yes.
going to do this regardless. Bond tries stopping him. They have a high elevation fight.
Yes.
And
Which sounds like it's in slow motion because
doesn't
they
it?
can't
Like, I
breathe.
can imagine if they did that filming because the both of them, I mean, they're getting deprived of oxygen at this point as they're up there.
Yep.
So it probably would be comical if we actually saw that filmed. Uh, but essentially, Marquis gets wounded mortally, and Bond isn't saving that poor sucker. He
No.
is left to die on the top of that mountain.
Yeah.
Hope and he make it back down. They share the oxygen thing that Q made for them.
Yep.
He says, "Oh, it can be used two-sided. You should like that." And Bond's like, "If it could be a man that has to share it, and that's the case, I dislike the
Right.
implication."
Right.
It's always about the implication. And this is when they get down to the base camp, the Paul Back, the communications guy,
Right.
reveals that he was the one that was the Union agent and tries stealing Skin 17.
Yeah, because he covered, if I remember correctly, in his tent, he had killed
Mm-hmm.
somebody else
Yep.
and threw his big puffy coat on it
Mm-hmm.
to make it look like it
Looked
was
like
him.
he had been killed, which again
Yeah.
is a very much an Agatha Christie type thing.
Yep.
And I really love it. They
Yeah.
do a
It was
great job.
it was a very good cliffhanger for that part, being like, oh my God, how is he still there?
So I know this sounds shocking, positively shocking, but Bond beats Paul
Yep.
in a climactic battle, and Bond has Skin 17. He returns it to not the US. Wow, my brain went full American there. He returns
Go
it to the
patriotism.
go patriotism. Uh, other sarcastic comments about how America's the best. Returns it to the British. They still haven't found Helena.
Right.
Unfortunately, the book ends on a very sorrowful note when Bond gets a phone call from Helena and she's worried. She's on the run. She was working for the Union. Bond's like, I can help you. And then basically the line is cut.
Cuts. Yep. Yeah. She admits everything to him, kind of comes clean, apologizes, and then is basically pleading for his help. Yeah.
And that's essentially how the book ends. We find out that she was murdered and Bond's left kind of in his sorrow, but knows that he will face the Union again.
I think that he does now because I read them back to back. Does he rush to that hotel? I think
Yes,
I thought
he
he
tries
tries to
making
rush to
it
the
there.
hotel to rescue her, but
He
it's too
tries
he
making
gets
it
there and
there,
it's too
but he's
late. Yeah.
too late.
Yeah.
When he arrives, she's
Yeah.
corpse.
She's already dead. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, great book, well written. The parts that we get fuzzy on, it's because interestingly enough, this is the thing where it becomes a cliche action movie. And I don't mean that derogatorily. I love cliche action movies. Some of
Yep.
my favorites, John Wick movies, absolutely amazing. But once it starts feeling like other things, it's easier to just start kind of rolling off into the distance.
Yeah. And there's always going to be something you can kind of pick at,
Mm-hmm.
but
But
overall, it's a great story.
it's a good story. It's a gripping story. It's an enjoyable one. And again,
Yep.
it's such a great original idea.
And again, not having ever tried to climb a mountain myself, but the way that Benson describes
Mm-hmm.
it, even though they're trying to do it in record time, it's realistic. The
Mm-hmm.
only part that's kind of like fantasy of the whole thing is, and maybe it's just because I don't understand the dynamics of planes, is the Skin 17 itself.
Yeah.
But creating a team to trek up a
Mm-hmm.
mountain for some, reason XYZ
Mm-hmm.
is realistic in itself. And then obviously people getting sick or people, you know, because it is the type of story it is, somebody, one person a day dying and oh my God, who is doing this to these people?
Well, and it has a great atmosphere to it because you
Yeah.
feel the cold with them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it just when you have that sense of being in the place, I had just finished reading Max McCoy's Indiana Jones and the Hollow Earth, I think it was called, which really fun. I enjoyed it, but
Yeah.
it has that like Arctic feel to it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's well written because you feel like you're actually there on a polar expedition. And this book does a good job of having a similar thing where you feel like you're there on the mountain with them. And it's an adventure.
Hold on a second. My son's
Yeah,
trying to
no
signal me. Go
worries.
ahead, buddy. He's right here. He's asking if you could get the iPad. Good. Sorry, I'm back.
Hey, got a dad.
But yeah,
So,
it's you feel like you said, you feel immersed in that cold environment as you're reading through it, and he does a good job of grasping that.
mhm. Where would you rank this? If now that you've read all of the Bensons and you can pick the last one, most recent one as your favorite if you want, but I'm just curious, where would you generally rank this?
I like. I'd say this one's probably second or third.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the Man with the Red Tattoo, which
Mm-hmm.
would be the kind of what we said would be kind of like the fourth one in the Union ones, even though there's no Union.
Mm-hmm.
It's the third one is kind of fed into it. Um, and I really like 0 - 10 also, but they're all. I mean,
They're
that
all
one's
enjoyable.
tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I like all the Fleming ones too, but they're a little bit easier to rank,
The
in my
Fleming
opinion.
ones, this is the thing that is fascinating about Fleming is admittedly, as much as we think of Bond as like this archetype, the books go bop, bop, bop.
Right.
He did not write most of his books with that kind of formula.
Right.
As much as I love From Russia with Love, it's probably my favorite Bond film, and I like my grounded, serious Bond. One of my favorite book Bonds is Dr. No, where he wrestles a giant squid. Like,
Yep.
to
Like
be
a
fair,
Kraken.
Yes, like a Kraken. To be fair, Fleming was like, oh, and then this happens. And it gets
Yep.
a little weird sometimes. Even with Diamonds Are Forever as a book, it, it's an odd one compared to the rest of the Fleming canon. It just feels a lot more like a gangster thing.
It
And
is a very much the Spangle mob or the Spangler mob, and it's very much a gangster book. I enjoy that book, but it's also kind of all over the place and not at all what you. The only really similarity
is Winton
between
Kid.
is Winton Kid.
And
They go to Las Vegas and
uh
the
and
Diamonds
and
and
uh
Tiffany Case.
and Tiffany Case, who I will say to my dying day, Jill St. John as Tiffany Case is still at least in my top 5 Bond girls, because
She does a really good, I think, with
what she's asked
a
to do, she does a good job doing.
yeah, I don't think she's given like the greatest of chances, but she knocks it out of the park with what she's got. Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Yeah. So tell me, Blake, thank you for first and foremost for joining me on this expedition of a mountain. We've trekked up, we have made it to the peak, or at least close enough to it without offending anyone, or
Exactly.
possibly anyone that was offended stopped listening within 10 minutes. And we've climbed back down. Tell me, what do you have going on? Where can people find you? All the
I'm
things.
For starters, thank you again for having me. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Always.
You and I are the ones that live the closest to each other for me, and yet we still are both two busy gentlemen, and we don't find enough time to get together face to face. We will change that soon, hopefully.
Hopefully.
But I always enjoy coming on and having an awesome talk with you, bond related or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am on Instagram, BondLife Chicago, like you said at the beginning. That's my only social media. Um, a lot of things Bond on there, some other stuff just kind of like Bond lifestyle stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
then I do my double O fight breakdowns, which as of now is still just focusing on different fight scenes in the Bond realm.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, once I run out of that, then I'm thinking to do some in just different spy movies and
Yeah.
kind of go on from there.
So, which is the most recent one that you've done for the 007 fight
Oh,
breakdowns?
what did I do? I posted it last week. What was it? It was the Skyfall opening pre-title fight scene between
Mm-hmm.
Bond and Patrice on the top of the train.
Mm-hmm. Which is spectacular. And again, one of those things that just works so well in Bond. As much as
Yep.
other people can do, Mission Impossible can use trains as much as they want, but that is Bond territory.
It is totally Bond territory to be standing on top of a train or a train just in general. Yeah.
Blake, thanks so much for joining us. We will link to that in the show notes. And I'll also encourage people to check out our Zorro episode because it is ridiculously fun.
Yes, it
Anytime you're
is.
on the show, it's a great time.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me too. I enjoyed it.
Till next time.